My name is Jill Phillips, and I'm the creator of Whose Shoes, a popular approach to co-production. I was named as an HSJ 100 wildcard and want to help give a voice to others, talking about their ideas and experiences. I'll be chatting with people from all sorts of different perspectives, walking in their shoes. If you are interested in the future of healthcare and like to hear what other people think, or perhaps even contribute at some point, Whose Shoes Wildcard is for you. So today I have the pleasure of talking to someone who I've known for many years, but in many ways have not really known at all. I first met Kate Pound about 10 years ago. I knew her as a mover and a shaker within the School for Healthcare Change Agents, with which we have both been closely associated. We both love doing things for initiatives like NHS Change Day and Fab NHS staff, little actions that make a difference to people without asking for permission. Anyway, Kate popped up on my radar again when we both attended an online session recently run by the Q community, How to Be More Pirate. I knew I would reconnect with some of my pirate friends there, and I was not disappointed. Kate was telling some of her personal story on the webinar in a way that I'd never heard it before. Growing up in a hostel for fishermen, one day there might be a royal visit, the next day there might be people drunk in the corridor, but hopefully not both on the same day. It was fascinating. Doing fabulous initiatives such as healthcare on the harbour, dentistry in porter cabins. It reminded me of Bob Mortimer on Would I Lie to You, that kind of thing, trying to work out what's true and what isn't. So making things accessible for fishermen and their families, just the sort of imaginative thinking that I love to feature on the podcast. And in Kate's day job in Nottingham, initiatives such as the Just Do It form, easy ways to get small amounts of funding to provide something effective, rather than having to jump through so many hoops that you lose the will to live and indeed spend more money going through the bureaucracy than you would do if you actually made the change. I wanted to hear more, and I thought you, my lovely listeners, would do too. So I'm delighted to welcome Kate to the podcast and look forward to inspiring you through storytelling and creating a blaze of lemon light bulb moments today. So welcome, Kate. Where would you like to start?
Well, thanks, Jill, for such a lovely introduction. That's amazing. I guess really I should start at the beginning. So I probably have described as a very divergent family in the fact that my dad came from a very small fishing community in the north of Scotland and my mum was a Londoner. So that kind of already said things were going to be very different. And my dad, when they got married, my dad was actually working in the Fisherman's Mission, and this was really important to him because his own father was lost at sea, and they supported him when, as a child. He was only 5 when he lost his dad, so it was really kind of like he'd lived through that experience. Goodness. So I was going to say, you start looking at our family. So my dad's, as I said, from Peterhead, my mum's from London. Because of the mission, my sister was born in Lowestoft and I was born in Shetland. So, we dotted around the country to many fishing ports. And I absolutely loved the experience of being in that environment. I remember as a little child we were living in North Shields at the time, and we'd have all the fishing boats outside and literally we could just walk several metres and we would be at the harbour. Next door there was the shop that used to give the supplies to the boats, and so they had great big bags of sugar and lentils, all this lovely stuff. And we used to call him Uncle Gordon, and he used to just let us play. I mean, goodness knows why he did that, because one day we mixed the sugar with the split peas and he was there left with this mess of a big sack of sugar and split peas. What he must have thought of us, but he just continued loving us. And I think that's probably because the work that my dad we do as a family, my dad would be outreach to those communities and helping them in their most difficult days, and then obviously supporting them through change. So when there's been a reduction in fishing vessels and you kind of all that, it can be very challenging. So we lived in North Shields. So from Shetland we went to North Shields. From North Shields we went to Fleetwood, and that was potentially the first hostel that I lived, or apart from Shetland was a hostel. Fleetwood was a larger hostel, and we've been there for about 3 years, maybe a bit longer, where we then went to Grimsby. And this was the biggest Fisherman's Mission hostel at the time. It had 52 bedrooms, and
Wow.
we had 4 flats. So it all sounds very posh, doesn't it? 52
I don't
bedrooms
know.
and 4 flats for the staff. But it was such an amazing place to live, you know, because there was always people around. You never kind of got lonely. There's always people there. And yes, you saw the bad days, but you saw many good days. So Christmas Day would always be with about 100 fishermen. So we used to open our Christmas presents on Christmas Eve because we knew that Mum and Dad were going to be really busy on Christmas Day. And as we got older, we were given jobs like, you know, my mum knew that she wanted like 5 Brussels sprouts per person. So you'd have to count all the Brussels sprouts and do things like that.
And that's a lot of people.
That is a lot of
A lot
people,
of Brussels
yeah.
sprouts.
A lot of Brussels sprouts. We used to obviously give because there was like catering staff and they would have the time off over Christmas. So my dad would roll his sleeves up and all the other assistants would roll the sleeves up, and the wives and children, whoever's there. It was all hands to the deck. And then, I mean, it was just lovely. Christmas dinner with
So sociable.
100 fishermen. Yeah, it was lovely. And then as the day went on, my mum and dad would still be busy. And I just remember sitting in one of the, they had these lounges, being in the lounge playing with one of the fishermen with my Barbie dolls, my Cindy. And, how weird is that, because these big burly fishermen and I'm sitting there and they're playing Barbie with me.
Probably loving it.
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, there's a lot of families that had separated, and that was the reason why they were living in the hostel, because they were unable, they separated from their families. And so doing that with us and playing was kind of like, I suppose, kind of healing in a way, because it meant that they valued that time, because it reminded them of their children and that opportunity to be enjoying children again. And it was just lovely. So so that was a very hectic Christmas, and quite interesting, because after a few years of our Christmases like that, our friends of our family would then actually say, "Oh, could we come and join you for Christmas?" Because they then realised that we had such a fabulous Christmas that they didn't want to miss out on it. So
yeah, just sitting around your own Christmas table with a small turkey and a few crackers would seem a little bit of a poor relation in comparison. I mean, a really life-influencing childhood there, Kate, and I think that shows, from what I know of you since.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you kind of mentioned before, some days were very dark and we'd witness the violence, which were very difficult, because often, sometimes it would also include my dad being attacked, which wasn't kind of nice. We used to have ear problems, so because fishermen are known for like millionaires one day, poor the next day. So they kind of often waste their money on alcohol and things like that. And I had some problems in the fact that they would ask my dad for subs, could the mission give them some subs before they get the next time on the boat. And my dad said no. The man would often go home and complaining about Mr. Slater, so I used to get it in the neck at school, which was difficult. But you kind of, I don't know, you have to look at it in a way that that was a protected family. I don't remember being like pained by it. I don't remember like hating them or anything like that. I just remember like I felt sorry for them, because there was a lot of poverty in the area as well. I mean, my parents didn't get paid a lot because it was a charity, but we always had fish on the table, literally. So we went from like these real low points where, my dad would be attacked, or, black eyes were never appropriate for the school pickup. Mm-hmm. But we then also go for the amazing days. So every year there would be a celebration. It's big fundraising really at Grimsby, and we'd have open docks. So many people don't go on the docks, and we wanted to kind of give people the experience of that. And so we'd have a fishing boat that people could go on and have a look round. We'd have the Navy fishery protection boats, and we have a lifeboat, and we do demos and all this sort of lovely stuff. And that really gave people like a wonderful experience. We tried really hard to get a good name to come and open it.
Right.
So one year we had Princess Alexandra. So my mum was obsessively cleaning. She was terrible. I mean, I joked that I should have put a plaque on the toilet because Princess Alexandra sat here. When you're little, that kind of means a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does.
So,
yeah.
But it was amazing. Like being, you can go from being with people that are addicted to alcohol 1 minute and, living on the street, rough sleeping, to having royalty visit you. And, it's given me that ability, I suppose, to think about how I work with different people. And, that it's easy for any of us to say, oh, that's never going to happen to me. But there's a lot of young people, especially that, that perhaps can't afford housing or heating or, so it's very much a problem of today. And I think that really helped me to get empathy, which I then obviously brought into nursing.
Yeah, that's incredibly, well, I think the whole thing's really informative. I mean, I'm learning so much about, who knows about fishing communities unless you're part of it, and to be able to kind of I can imagine, and me as a child, I remember one of the highlights was going and sitting in a police car. So it's the same kind of thing, isn't it, to actually get a little bit steeped into somebody else's experience. But I can see how that sort of richness in terms of health inequalities and the change leader work that you do now must have been very formative. And tell us about, I mentioned it, I think, in the introduction. I was fascinated by this health on the harbour side and just the story behind that in terms of why would that be needed, Kate?
So I have the privilege now of being a trustee for the Fisherman's Mission, so I kind of bring that experience of living in the mission, and it's very much that family. And what we realised is that there was a neglect. So fishermen, if the weather's good, they go out, and it doesn't matter if they've got an appointment for the doctors, doesn't matter if they've got a dental appointment, the weather's good, and that's money.
Yeah.
So they have to get out, and it's kind of recognising that because of those things, they do not access or find it difficult to access healthcare. So the Fisherman's Mission, with another organisation, developed a programme. It was just a pilot programme initially called CFIT, and that was offering healthcare checkups and everything at the harbour. So we had dentistry. So during COVID, we realised that a lot of the fishermen weren't able to get vaccinations because it's difficult to get crew nowadays. So we have a lot of Filipino overseas workers, and it's really tricky for them because they have a transit visa, which means they basically have to live on the boat. And I kind of liken it, if we imagine we said to our overseas workers that come into the NHS, you have to live on the ward.
Right.
And that's it. It's incredibly difficult, So they're almost hidden because you don't see them. You don't see these people. And Mission saw them, and Mission realised that they had to do something. So we organised with healthcare providers to give vaccinations, and literally we had people climbing onto the boats to give the vaccinations, and that was amazing because also what it also gave them is their status that they'd been vaccinated, because without that status they wouldn't have been able to return home.
Right.
It was more than just being protected, because obviously they're a small community, close quarters. The COVID affected the fishing crew, it would be probably fatal.
Yeah.
For some of them. But actually not being able to get back to your families, especially when there's like the world pandemic, I think would have been dreadful. So by doing the vaccinations, by giving the documentation they needed, it actually allowed them to return to their families at a difficult time.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm really proud of.
Yes, I bet. Yeah,
really proud of it. Yeah. And, I think those, when you look at what the organisation has done, you kind of now go back and you kind of say, well, things can be done in the NHS. We can deliver things differently. You know, who would have thought 10 years ago we would be having healthcare at the harbour, we'd be having GP service and, you know, health prevention and all these things focus on the harbour. And what tends to be is that they have like I'm going to say travelling small, like a caravan or something a bit bigger than that, like, and they'll actually have all that set up so people can come in, have their checkups or get various tests, so such as like hepatitis, things like that. Also, they do like blood tests for high cholesterol or any other issues, and they've picked up undiagnosed diabetes, high blood pressure, all these things that actually could have been potentially life-threatening for them. And then the dentistry was a later innovation, and it was amazing. I just love the dentist. So they literally drive a mobile dentist bus or truck, and they take it to the harbour, and it meant that the families were able to access NHS dentists as well. So during COVID, it was really difficult because income really dropped because nobody wanted to buy the fish. There wasn't the restaurant, so it was really difficult.
Of course.
You know, financially, they were really hit. The fishing community were really hit. So in recognition for that, I mean, we all know it's difficult getting an NHS dentist anyhow, but when you've got the added problem of actually financial difficulty, even if you do have an NHS dentist, it's good that we were able to see children, your mums, grandparents, we were able to take care of that community. And, it's giving people respect, because if you have a lot of tooth decay and potentially would lose your teeth, and then that just, you affects your confidence levels. Yeah. So again, very proud of that service. And actually last week, the CFIT won a fishing news prize, which is really exciting. So it's the whole fishing community have this newspaper, and I guess it's kind of like the Nursing Times for fishermen. And they won a big prize in it, so it's been recognised.
I should think so too, yeah.
And so Bola, from the Health and Inequalities team and Director for Health and Inequalities, was amazed. She actually came down and visited the service.
Oh, wow.
And she has used the service as an example of what can be done about where we place care and how we get it accessible for people.
That's extraordinary, Kate, and it reminds me, in terms of perhaps themes running through the podcast, so two things come to mind from what you've said, and that's how I love to kind of like link it because of other examples. So I did one episode with Rosie Murphy, who's a fantastic midwife leading on health inequalities, and we ran a Who Shoes workshop together in Croydon, and we ran it at the local Asian centre and really kind of engaged with the local community. And then I found out more about them. So nothing to do with my work with Rosie, the kind of work they're doing at the community centre, really using it as a healthcare hub and doing exactly those sort of things, just checking people's blood pressure or talking to them about health, and obviously saying actually it's important that you see the GP and being that kind of segue between the formal services, and it just saving lives really, isn't it, ultimately?
Oh, completely. And again, it's those hard to reach communities.
And again, my very first podcast conversation was with Dr. Fazana Hussain, who I love to bits, and she's a GP in, I think, the most deprived borough in London. And the stuff that she was doing, she talks about the stuff that she was doing during the pandemic. And again, we need to keep up with ordinary things. So immunisations for children, let's have an outdoor clinic, let's have a drive-through clinic. And, it just feels the same kind of spirit as what you're saying about the health on the harbour side, that there are different ways of doing things, aren't there, to reach people.
Absolutely. And I think because I knew we were doing that in the mission, and dare say it would have happened anyhow, I kind of encourage and say, well, get a bus, because, there's lots of rough sleepers in London. What can we do to get vaccinations to those rough sleepers. And it can be done. And they set up a bus and it went round all London and various places. And again, those people probably wouldn't have been able to access. Because the thing is, when you're, so like the Filipinos, their visa, maybe rough sleepers, because they don't have an address, it's really difficult to register at a doctor, at a GP. And if you don't register, it means you just don't get the opportunity then to be offered the vaccinations. So very important.
Very important. And then again, another example that I heard of, and I mean, obviously some of these examples you've got to share quite anonymously, because there was a GP practice that I heard of who were just wanting their local population to be vaccinated. That was all they were worried about, for the benefit of everybody. And they had quite a large Brazilian community, and they had Brazilian cleaners, and basically they served as that, like, linking the two. So the fact that they trusted the GPs and the fact that they knew their friends, and they could say, look, it's okay, come along, nobody's going to be asking all sorts of difficult questions, just come along and have your vaccinations. And it's a win-win, really, isn't it? Because wouldn't we all want that to happen?
Absolutely.
But it takes that little bit
Absolutely.
of imagination, doesn't it, and finding a way around things rather than just hitting the rules full on.
Completely. And I mean, Royal London they ran a vaccination clinic in Stratford in the shopping centre. And again, I remember contacting one of the nurses in the team and just saying, I've got somebody, can they be? And it's like, just send them down. We vaccinate everybody because we want everybody to be vaccinated. So, and it's just that real, being open-minded that actually you shouldn't exclude this group. We shouldn't exclude people from the opportunity. It's also that group of people potentially would be harder hit with COVID.
Yes.
So, it's more important than ever that we help people and reduce the gap and reduce the inequalities that people face.
Again, I remember Fazana said that she'd phoned up the people who weren't coming forward for a vaccination, and not to tell them they had to have one, but to listen to them and find out what they were worried about. And of course, in the process of that, talking to somebody trusted like their GP that they've got a relationship with, not everybody, but more would come forward. So it's the same, human factor, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And remembering that we're all human and we all have that need to kind of be empathetic or to feel cared for. Those are fundamental bits that make us humans.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, changing tack a little bit then, Kate. I think I mentioned in the introduction something that I call in my head. I don't know whether it is actually what it was called, the Just Do It form, because I absolutely love that. Is that something you can tell us more about?
Absolutely.
And that's something like a lemon light bulb from this podcast that people could do the same, couldn't they? How good would that be?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I shall always remember the first big improvement programme I was involved in at Nottingham Hospitals, working in the emergency department, and we would ask staff what quick wins, what are the things that would make a difference. And one of the ideas was, I'd like to have a docking station in the treatment room, so like where they do stitches and other kinds of things, because if I got that, then I can offer people the chance of putting their iPhones in and playing music to distract them. So it was like, great idea. But then we had to try and access money, and it was really difficult. In the end, our consultant just said, don't worry, I'm off to John Lewis, and he came back with a docking station for them, which was brilliant. But it made us realise as an improvement team that it's really difficult for staff to access money, and these are quick win stuff. This shouldn't be this like layer of bureaucracy just to get, change a light bulb. You just don't need that. So with colleagues, they set up the Just Do It fund. So Tim Geiler was like key in that, and he still works at Nottingham Hospitals.
Brilliant.
Amazing guy. And so the Just Do It fund was accessible money. It was donated by the charity, hospital charity, and people could access it with a simple form. And then what we would also do is we kind of ask people to tell us the story. What difference did it make?
Yes.
and then we'd have the Just Do It awards, and it was lovely. So we'd have all the posters up. The comms team would make these beautiful posters for the people that had got the Just Do It funds, and we would then have this chant where they met the board and the other visitors. So I remember Jackie Linton came with me on one, if you remember Jackie Linton.
I remember Jackie, I do, yes.
Yeah, and it was just lovely. And so, some of the real stories that really impacted on me was the surgical porters. So their simple thing was, I would like to have a blanket warmer because, so city hospitals, like long corridors, old building, and patients will get cold.
Yes.
And they just wanted to keep patients warm.
And it's important, isn't it, surgically as well?
Well, this is the thing. So these people kind of just were thinking about, I want to care for this person. I want to wrap them up and keep them warm when they come. And that's all they were thinking about. But actually what they didn't realise, that, as you say, surgically, going in at your optimum temperature, your core temperature, actually reduces time in recovery.
Right.
So it meant that just by those porters saying, I want a blanket warmer, actually helped with the throughput and, led to a change. And it was amazing. And I just love it where the ideas come together for the team and we actually see that whole team impact.
They're brilliant examples. And I love it when people are actually listening to the porters, because it doesn't always happen. So no hierarchy, just people, isn't it?
Oh. Porters are you must use your porters because they're like gold dust. They are the people that go to every ward in the hospital. They'll be able to tell you which ward they wouldn't want to be a patient on. They know all this. So use your hospital porters find out what frustrates them, what annoys them, and then you've got an opportunity to improve that. And it's patient outputs at the end, but by using their eyes and ears, got a real opportunity to make a difference.
And I think Kate, that we use poems quite heavily in Whose Shoes, and some of them are a bit more in depth and some of them are really dead simple. And one of them is, now let me try and remember it. There was a hospital porter called Jim who thought consultants could be rather dim. He'd worked there so long, he knew what was wrong, but nobody thought to ask him.
Brilliant.
And that really just makes the point, that people have got eyes and ears, and the people that the patients probably trust and just get chatting to a little bit. And fantastic that you're listening. And what a brilliant, very, very shareable example that is. Keep people warm.
Absolutely. And so one of the porters, I always remember them saying to me, it's a radiology porter, was saying, we're probably the one group of staff that have the most one-on-one time with the patient, because we actually, taking them up, taking them down, and we're probably the only person that has that amount of time together with the patient. So it's a really good opportunity to find out more about the patient, what they're worried about and how they can help them. So, it's just lovely.
And we did a Whose Shoes project with Kingston Hospital actually around operating theatres. And again, that was one of the scenarios that came through, that the porters were saying that people might ask them something that, because they were approachable, something that really should have been asked to the surgeon, but someone saying, do you think, and just coming out with something really perhaps quite medical that obviously they can't answer, but it shows the kind of relationship and trust and the concerns that people have got if only people would create the conditions, I guess, for them to feel safe to talk and to listen to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when I worked at Nottingham, we did a improvement programme in radiology, and we worked a lot with the porters, and we discovered that the radiology porters, there was two sites. On each site, there was one person basically walking around trying to find patients every day, because patients move, the system's not updated, so we lose the equivalent of one person every day to find patients, basically, because if it's they're not there, then they have to come back to the hub and kind of go, well, where are they? So the porters then created a great piece of work, and I shall always remember one of them saying to me, I can't, because again, somebody wrote a poem, one of the porters wrote a poem, and he was amazing. But this other porter said, well, I can't write poems or anything like that, but I like doing cartoons. And he did things like, his cartoons were amazing. One of them was like, it was getting the point across, and it had captions on it. So this cartoon was a porter with a wheelbarrow going up to the nurse's station saying, are you sure you ordered the right type of transport? And it was just that subtle way of getting messages across. And, again, it's using those hidden talents of our staff that we don't realise they're there.
Yeah, and then people just enjoy that so much, and that member of staff probably gets more respect amongst their team because, hey, I didn't realise you could do brilliant cartoons or play the piano or whatever it might be. I love that. Absolutely love that. Brilliant.
It was brilliant.
So I want to give at this point a shout out to Nottingham Hospitals, because back in January we did a Who Shoes workshop with the maternity team, and they're the first trust that have concentrated on home birth. So already that's innovative. And the way that Lisa Common and her team have written up that Who Shoes event in terms of proper research and all of the pledges and following up to see what happens as a result of the pledges. So just like your Just Do It form, we've got JFDI, encouraging people to make small pledges, or to make pledges. I mean, very often they are small, very often they become bigger, if you help people and look at one step at a time. So the way that Lisa in particular has written that up, I think is extraordinary, and is now feeding into further things. And, I think they're very keen to be looking in more depth at health inequalities. And, there's a relationship there and they're building. Whereas people say to me sometimes, was it a good Who Shoes event? And, well, lots of people came. We had bunting, we had cake, we had a good time, we had some great discussions. But until you see it followed up in that kind of way, to see how you can glean all the learning and follow up, then was it such a great event? Probably not, So I think that they're doing extraordinary work and obviously under a lot of pressure at the moment. And I think people need to hear that.
Completely. And I remember for NHS Change Day, some people put really simple things like, I'm going to smile more.
Yes.
And actually, that's not such a stupid idea, because if you smile more, then you're building trust. And, trust is fundamental, to raise concerns. So by smiling more, it lightens the atmosphere, but actually it creates trust. So people are more likely to raise a concern and say, hang on a minute, we just need to stop. So, small things come great things.
And this is the interface, isn't it, between patient experience, which can be seen as fluffy, and patient safety, which is obviously desperately important. But the two, and that's why I love the work of, I don't know if you've come across, it's another podcast episode, but Miles Sibley, and he's the founder of Patient Experience Library. Now, I talk about how patient stories are important, but Miles makes it evidence-based and shows that actually they've got the same validity as the more medical staff. And the language around, if you're a doctor, you write a serious incident report, you write, something with substance, a report of something, whereas patients have patient stories. And, even the language that sits behind it makes that difference in power, really. So I love bringing these stories together.
I feel there's been a real shift in patient involvement, from actually just being volunteers to being paid workers. I think there's a massive shift. I've been working with them in NHS England, patients in the lived experience team.
So there are lived experience partners, because I was involved in that with Christina Sorrell.
And they're amazing people and their skills are phenomenal.
Yes.
They've got the most great team. And I mean, historically, so that's what I always remember, if somebody complained, often they would be, or do you want to come to our patient involvement group? And so you end up with this really toxic environment of all these people that just complained.
Right.
And it would be really difficult meeting, and flipping that to actually being really positive and actually having great outcomes. So I love design thinking. And the fundamental of design thinking is look at the problem through the eyes of the users. So look at what's happening, understand, get empathy with them and understand why this is difficult. Those high pressure points of anxiety, what is it and what can we do differently?
Just understanding people, isn't it?
Oh, massively. And getting that opportunity to work differently, because it's always the way, sometimes when you get consultancy firms coming in, they're asking the same questions, just a different team, and they're asking the same group of staff, and we get the same answers. So by shifting and moving that focus, we're going to get more divergent, we're going to be different, we're going to get creative ideas because they've got such amazing skills and experiences.
And that's where I love it when you can bring in, I mean, say in maternity, you've got maternity voices partnerships, and they're amazing. And obviously you need people who become, through their own experience and through training and through being involved in groups, more expert and able to deal with the NHS, etc. But with our Whose Shoes workshop, as well as that, we can bring in the mum who had a baby last week. We've had a 4-day-old baby at our workshop. We can bring in people.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I'm quite proud of this, actually. I think it might be Guinness Book of Records. I think the youngest person we've ever had at a Whose Shoes workshop was 4 days old. And the oldest person in a different context, our dementia work, 101. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So that is inclusive, certainly in terms of age. But I think the point I was trying to make was that not everybody is able to be on a group and to commit that time and that involvement, but to be able to kind of catch people as they come through in whatever way they're able to feedback, and to have as many different and varied ways of people feeding back their story or snippets of their story and then acting upon them.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of really listening, not just being present, but actually really listening and just catching those bits that, we used to say patients would open up and tell you more when you're washing them and things like that.
Yes.
But we have to listen, and it's these little snippets and kind of think, well, what does that mean? And be curious, ask more questions.
Yeah, I think that be curious. And again, I'm working really closely now with Yvonne Newbold, and she's set up Newbold Hope, and their mantra is stay kind, be curious. And I think that runs through everything, whether it's in Yvonne's case from a sort of family carer's point of view or from a staff point of view. But if you're actually really interested in people, then the rest follows, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. It was reminding me of Parallel, which is based in London, and they support reducing disabilities or gaining access. So every event is accessible, and it's just phenomenal work. So they've got a big event in Windsor on the 2nd of July. Anybody can come. And their mantra is start together, finish whenever.
Right, yes.
And they've got stuff for everybody. So if you can only do a century walk, then there's a 10-metre century walk, all designed. And if you want to do a 15k run, there'll be a big run.
Yes.
And they're using, I remember right, there's an orchestra which is made up of people with disabilities, and it's just phenomenal. And I just love the fact that their ambition is we will do accessible events for everyone.
Yeah, for everyone, yeah.
So everybody's welcome, and it's that same sort of thing. I love that, start together, finish whenever.
Yeah.
So, there's not the pressure, and everybody gets a medal. It's lovely.
And everyone feels good because they've actually been able to take part in something on their own terms and as equals, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that kind of mindset is how we should be approaching patient involvement. Think differently. How can we get those people involved? How can we think differently?
And I think people just love it. I mean, our experience, and people are saying at the moment, to run a Whose Shoes workshop with staffing pressures and getting people in the room, and it does take time and effort to plan it and do the admin and so on. But what I love is, we call them lemon light bulbs, and you see people's eyes light up because they realise that they can do something, however busy they are. Just pick out the ideas that have come through this podcast, and people suddenly feel empowered, and they don't have to ask for permission. And then, they might say, oh, I want to do such and such. And then somebody else said, oh, that was my idea. And then you have a bit of a joke and you say, well, perhaps do it together. And then you have a bit of fun. and then it builds within a team.
Absolutely.
And I think however busy people are, that's the kind of thing that hopefully makes them want to get up in the morning and actually carry on when things are difficult.
Completely. And I always say that everybody at work should have a project of joy. They have something that really makes their heart sing and just feel like this is such a lovely project. So I've been working on the staff wellbeing programme at the moment, and it's my project of joy because we have staff from the acute, we active nurse who's leading work on wellbeing, and he does amazing things. So they've had the deconditioning games, and he's been kind of really leading that on his ward and getting everybody involved and everybody kind of get up and active and moving.
Fantastic.
Which is really important for prevention of deconditioning. But he's also taken it the other way. So he has created an environment for their staff to be active and encourage them. So they've had like nature walks and like all great things like yoga, and he's just looking at the whole picture. And it goes back to, when your staff are well and happy, then actually that improves your care for your patients, and it's just lovely.
And I can feel that someone like that would be embedding it into what you're doing, not just having it as a tick box, we need a yoga session, because that's his thing. And he'd be like passionate and then good at running it and then engaging, and people would tell their friends and want to come back the next time. It's a positive cycle, isn't it?
Absolutely. And so we've got AJ, she's leading the staff wellbeing work. It's at Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Kings Lynn. And I have just been blown away by what that organisation is doing. It's had its difficult days, but now it's really taking shape in other ways of really kind of like real commitment and action to support staff wellbeing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I mean, you're giving me goosebump moments now, Kate, because I'm thinking there are so many potential podcast people to talk to as a result of, the different kind of like leads that you're throwing out and the different bits of good practice. I absolutely love the project of joy, and it makes me think of, so through my breast cancer experience particularly, I've come across Liz O'Riordan, and she's in that area. She's I'm not quite sure where, but just made me think of her. And she's a breast cancer surgeon who's got breast cancer herself, and she's making it her absolute mission to be using that knowledge from both sides of the fence, if you like, to really inform people and putting herself out on social media. But the reason I particularly thought of Liz, apart from the fact she's amazing, is she's got a jar of joy. And she's got a podcast, and at the end of every podcast, she gets somebody to say something recent that's happened to them, and she's done a TED talk about it as well. So amazing. Joy at work, and things that people can just dismiss as, how can we have that if we're so busy and you don't understand? But if you flip it, if you don't have it, then what have you got left? And I just love the way that people, you people, if you like, are building that and helping people see that, we want people to be able to get up in the morning and come to work and make a difference and feel that they can. And that's almost certainly what brought them into healthcare in the first place.
Exactly.
So let's not lose that.
And I just think by doing like projects of joy and staff wellbeing, if I just impact on one member of staff not leaving the NHS, I'm happy, because, we need to stop that. We need to look after our staff, create the atmosphere where they can have things that really sing to their heart, projects of joy, and alongside that is the staff wellbeing. But you'll kind of find when you've got projects of joy, you feel happier at work, full stop. And as you say, you get excited because there's something, we've all got our little thing that we're really passionate about.
We have.
I've talked about the fisherman's mission. So, obviously inequalities and that side, it gets me really passionate. And we just need to ask those questions. What is it that you're really passionate about that we can bring into work to make a difference? And, use that as you can do it as part of an appraisal, but just ask the question, what are you passionate about? And how can we get that to make a difference at work?
Brilliant. Okay, so I think we probably need to draw it to an end, but I've got a mega lemon light bulb and I'm going to do it now. So I think you'll be interested in this, Kate. I'm developing with Lewisham and Greenwich Hospital some new Who Shoes material for student nurses. And it's got just that thinking behind it, like how do we support students through their placements and with, cost of living crisis and, all the different pressures that people have got that students have always had, but perhaps all the more so at the moment. And I'm trying to build in one or two kind of well-being scenarios. And I think perhaps what do you think? The Project of Joy could go in? Would that be a good one?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Completely.
And the appraisal, what are you passionate about? I think those two just immediately leap out at me.
And so my daughter's just qualified as a nurse.
Fantastic.
And she was elected chair of the Nursing Society. And one of the things, unfortunately, there was issues because of COVID, but one of the things she had wanted to do was kind of write a directory because, if you're new to the area, you're not going to know where a GP is. You're not going to know all these things. How do you use a photocopier? All these really difficult.
Right,
They
yes.
seem really easy, but they're really difficult when you're new to the area. And then also kind of having some mental support, having a final year student supporting some of the new student nurses, and just creating that safe environment where they can talk and, get support. Because, they've all been there. I remember Eliza, so she was on her placement and everybody's going about PANAD. I think I've said that right. You're going on PANAD? And she was like, oh, no, thank you. It's so good. And it wasn't until she went to her next placement she discovered that PANAD meant going for your cup of tea, going for your break.
How would you know that?
So she missed on one placement. Yeah, exactly. So she trained in Wales, and, that was Welsh. Well, do you want a cup of tea? Come in to go for your break. And she missed her breaks on her first ever placement. So, it's those, she laughs about it because those experiences that, make a difference.
So on a very silly note to finish with, it reminds me of my next door neighbour when I was a child, and she kept asking me if I wanted to go and spend a penny. And we had a corner shop at the end of the street, which was a sweet shop, or included some sweets where, obviously I'm showing my age, but you could go and spend a penny and buy blackjacks and fruit salads. And she'd send me to the toilet. So what was that about, Kate? Language.
Language, absolutely. Language. And, using language that connects and is meaningful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kate. I knew that we could just talk and we didn't have to have, an interview or set questions, that the conversation would just flow. And I think we could talk for a very long time, but I think, and come up with loads of different anecdotes, but I think that's given people a flavour, hasn't it? I'm thrilled with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, as again, if you can make a difference for a handful, then that's worth it.
Perfect. Thank you. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. If so, please subscribe now to hear more of these fascinating conversations on your favourite podcast platform. And please leave a review. I tweet as Whose Shoes. Thank you for being on this journey with me, and let's hope that together we can make a difference.